Okay. Perfect. So, hi.
Hey.
I think we've got our nervousness out now that
Hello.
We've had 15 takes.
Yes, guys. So the first episode went super well, minus the whole cat
fiasco. It was just like,
and I think it was funny because like we all loved that blooper, of course, but now we're really we have something to.
Well, we've got another 50 minutes of bloopers leading up to this beginning.
So you're welcome.
Stay tuned for that. So when we left off last time, I got a lot of feedback. I'm sure you got even more.
Yep.
That there was like a lot of emotion when people were watching it. I had some people reach out to me saying that they felt like they wanted to watch it but they couldn't because of just it was so sensitive and they were waiting till the right time. And the YouTube video I think got like well over 700
well I think views. And I think that is it is such a sensitive subject, so people, us as humans, don't like to feel those emotions, but it's a very strong thing that needs to be addressed.
It's like me watching a scary movie.
Yeah. Like I just want to. I just avoid. And that's the problem with society, is we just avoid.
Yeah.
And this is why we're talking about this, and it needs to have, we need to shed a light on those things.
And everything though, because I mean people are really quiet about like mental health and things that I'm like an open book, I feel like, and you're an open book about everything that you're going through.
Yeah. Now.
You weren't always.
No.
But that's good. And I think that the more that people see that, especially on social media, the more that people can relate to you as a person, you know?
And that's why we're here. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody that watched.
Hanging out with us.
And we kind of just had a conversation about how much, like, we thought we were just going to do like one episode and we were going to get through everything. Yeah. And that we just talked about that it was like 3 years.
3 years.
That we thought we could cram into 1 hour.
Ups and downs, and that's just not realistic. Right?
Yeah. So we left off on, like, we talked about Gwen's life. We talked about motherhood for you. We talked about the medical community for you.
Yep.
And now then we kind of closed off on, like, the evening that you lost Gwen.
Yeah.
And that's where we left it. And so I think that we should really like pick up from there, because so essentially you've said like you made the decision for them to stop CPR. And at that point Gwen passed away. And like, so what happened like after that? Were you alone at the hospital? Was your family there with you?
So just to kind of touch base, when we were traveling into the hospital, I kind of knew that this little one has been out of oxygen for so long, and there's no way that, even if she did wake up, what would the brain health look like for her? And so, of course, like when we arrived, my family kind of arrived, and we all kind of trickled into this little room, and these little rooms are very known at the hospital, whether it's post-surgery conversations, or
it's like a family room.
It's like a family room, or it's not always the best news. So when they put us in there, I kind of had a feeling like, okay, something's happening and something's gone on, and it's not good. And the doctor and the medical staff kind of came in and asked, like, who is Gwendolyn's mother? And I was standing there, and my family was kind of behind me, and she said, I'm sorry, but we've been trying since the moment you called 911 for now an hour. We have no brain activity. What do you want us to do? And I didn't even really, I think back now, and it was just an instant, just stop. And I remember in that moment, everyone dropped around me. My mom kind of like started hysterically crying, and everyone just kind of fell to the floor, and like they went to go grab me, and I was like, don't touch me. And I just stood there, and I remember just standing there, and instant shock, right? It's there to serve us for a reason. It's there to protect us, and it did for a long time. But that
you
was
were
really
like the
hard.
only one that was like,
I was the only one
not
that I
reacting.
don't think it hit me very well. I didn't react. I'm like, okay. And, they said, take your time. We're going to go and do what we have to do. When you're ready, let us know to come see her. And I took quite a while to go in, because I didn't want to. Obviously, that was something that I wanted to avoid.
Accept.
Yeah. And again, everyone's crying. And I remember there was this big chair in this room, and I just kind of didn't even sit in the chair. I went and sat behind it. And I just sat there, and in my thoughts, and I was thinking, what am I doing? Like, what, who am I now?
Because essentially, like, everything that you had and that you've like worked to in the last couple of months or years is now just like taken from you. And I feel like your whole identity became...
Well, as a mother, you have a routine, right?
Yeah.
Like that your world should surround around your children for the most part, I think. And it was like my world just literally came crashing down within seconds, and I couldn't grasp it. And I remember saying to them, like, the worker came in and she said, you know, where do you work? What do you do? Let me handle all of that. And I just said to her, I looked at her, I said, I need help. I need help tomorrow. Because I was already trying to seek help at the time for my PTSD with everything that Gwendolyn had gone through. And so I was already in kind of the motion of going towards that direction. But I just looked at her and I said, you know, I need somebody to help me immediately.
Immediately, yeah.
Like now. So eventually, you know, we went into the room, and even when I seen her, I didn't cry. I kind of crawled up on the bed with her, and again, like, my family was around, I think, and then they left Gwen and I on our own, and I just held her, and it was a very, I think back now of how horrible it was, but at the time, I just had no emotion.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to leave, because for so long I left Gwendolyn in the hospital when she was in hospital, and I would have to go home on my own. But now I'm leaving without her for good.
Yeah.
And she's going elsewhere. And of course, you know, there's the coroner reports, the police reports, the forensics, and that's a lot to deal with all at once. And the insensitivity that can come with that. So it was really hard. Like I said, I didn't cry at all. We left the hospital shortly after. And even on the way back, I kind of like turned off my phone and I said, you know, Mom, call Kaylee. She'll let everybody else know.
Yeah, I remember I got that call at like 11.
Yeah, it was, I don't really know timelines. And then I think when we arrived home, that's when it hit me. You know, I walked in and there was her high chair there. And that's when I just fell to the ground. And I said, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be in this house. I want to sell it. I want to fucking move away, because it's too painful. It's 4 walls of shattered memories and what could have been at that moment. And that's when it hit me. Like an hour or so later, I was like, my daughter's dead.
I remember just like clinging to her things too. Like I remember coming to see you the next day. Yeah, her blanket.
Her bears, her clothes.
Yeah. Like not washing her shirts and
forever.
Things like that. I remember.
And I didn't, and I still have a few of her shirts like wrapped up in these bags, and every once in a while when I have a hard time, I open them up and I can smell her smell. And it's a beautiful thing, but I was really messed up, and I think back now, like, I was so angry. I was like, how did this happen? Like, how the fuck did this happen? I finally let my guard down. She was doing what she's supposed to do. I had her in the, like...
She was thriving.
She was thriving. She was flourishing. She was Gwendolyn. And it was so nice to have that opportunity to see her. And, like, I think that stuff is one minute you're here and the next you're not. And I had the impression, like, she's okay. Yeah. We're just going to be admitted for the whole time. So, yeah, that next morning I woke up and there's tons of people at my house. My doctor actually came out and sat with me in her room, and we just cried. Because her medical team didn't see any of it coming either. So then the anger came in, and the why her, why me, why us, like, have we not been through enough?
Yeah.
Right? And that's a lot. And when you have no control over a situation, you start feeling guilt, because guilt is that one feeling that we can feel and have control over a little bit, I think.
I think you feel guilt when you can't control
I had no power.
But I think even before you were feeling those emotions, I remember going out to your house the day after.
Yes.
The morning after.
Yeah, you have to chime in on this, because I don't remember a lot of these moments.
I know
I don't remember you
I
even
think
being
that
there.
you like blacked out. Well, we were sitting, we were inside, and then I know you had a lot of people coming through. There was so many people coming through. You know, we were inside, we were outside, we were kind of like moving around, but I think you don't remember because you were like heavily medicated.
I was very medicated.
Heavily medicated. Mm-hmm. And I think you were also like super like disassociated.
That's when that's when it really happened for me.
Yeah. And I think just like being like blacked out, not even in the first like couple of days. I think that took a really long time. I do remember, you know, you feeling like, why did this have to happen? Like, why her? This isn't fair. Feeling those emotions really early. And then I remember too, us having a conversation about, we think about like the stages of grief, and we think about, you know, how those stages, but for you, it seemed like it was everywhere. One day or 1 minute, you know, you were sound and you were okay and we were having conversation, and then the next you know felt sad and
I feel like
delirious.
it was hour by hour.
Yeah, minute by minute.
Something that like a lot of people have to touch base on. So stages of grief, there is no such thing as stages of grief.
And I learned that watching you go through that.
We're brought up to believe, okay, and I thought that too. I was like, okay, I'm in the stages of grief right now. Like right now I'm in denial, I'm in shock, and that's going to fade eventually, and then I'm going to be angry, and then I'm going to be very sad, and then I'm going to be in acceptance, and then I'm going to live on. That doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
That study was done in the 60s or 70s with people who were dying, and that was focused on, okay, they're in denial that they're dying.
Right.
Okay, now they're accepting of this. They're angry, but they're accepting
So
their
it
death.
wasn't like even a study based on how someone else perceives death or grief.
Goes through grief. Yes, we go through those stages, but I will go through those stages for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because grief is having all the love in the world and nowhere for it to go.
Right.
And I remember talking to like Gwen's godmother, and we talk about it often because again, I ask questions like, well, I said, how did you find out? And she goes, Tamara, your mom called me. And I go, okay. And she goes, and I talked to you for an hour that day. And I don't remember. I have no I have no recall on any of that.
Yeah. And who was there?
And who was there. And I would just remember I'd wake up and a ton of people were in my bed surrounding me, and you know, you'd go out and there was cars down the road, and I was so grateful in that moment. But I think that's what happens is, you know, you grieve, you have the service. It was, I think, 7 days later, we had the initial wakes, and then following that was the funeral. And I was still really unable to cry. Like I had moments, but it was like, I remember at the service, and this is where shock comes in. I would be holding people in my arms as they're sobbing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. And
yeah, I remember there was moments that, you know, like I could hear you laughing, you know, because I think also too that like you wanted to talk about her, you wanted to remember her, you were still like, when you weren't feeling those emotions is because you were still in that like denial phase. And that that this wasn't really happening, and at this point it was just about like sharing about Gwen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But not sharing about Gwen because she's now gone.
And even then, like Kath and I would talk about it, and she's like, you know, do you remember asking me if like I could ask them, you know, could you hold her? Like I just wanted to hold her. And the guy of the funeral home, he was wonderful. He's like, I'm sorry, like you can't hold her.
Yeah.
That hurt. And I remember seeing her, and you know, he warned me like, she's not gonna look like herself. And I knew that, and I expected that, but obviously you see things for the autopsy,
but that's something that I was wondering if you wanted to talk about, because I know, so when there was 3 services.
Yes.
The first day was the Monday.
And that was for friends and family.
And that was friends and family.
Yep.
And that was open casket for us. And that was really hard. It was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving. I remember Kaylee calling and saying that you had, you know, like looked and you just wanted to like know and see her for like
I just wanted to see what they did to her.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, Tamara, don't look. Like, you don't need to look. And I said, I do. I need to. I don't know. I guess maybe that's corrupted, but in my mind, I was like, I just need to know.
You just need to know everything. Yeah. Like, this is still your baby, and like, she's still yours.
And I held her, you know, as much as I could, and I sang to her.
Yeah.
And I read her a book, and so did her father. And,
but at that point, then you decided to like,
well, we were thinking moving forward, you know, like we're like, it's a really hard situation. And, yeah, so we had a closed casket after that, but
I think that was such a special thing. I feel like
it was beautiful.
For us to have that opportunity to see her,
just hold her, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And she was beautiful, regardless. But I needed to know that, and I needed to kiss her lips, because when she passed away, they had intubated her, and because she's a child, they couldn't remove the intubation tube. And I just thought, like, you came into this world intubated, and now you left this world intubated.
Yeah.
I couldn't pick her up. I couldn't hold her. I couldn't kiss her.
The same way that you experienced her coming in. Yeah.
So that was really hard navigating. And of course, like, you're sitting around and everyone's talking, well, how are we going to honor Gwen? And I just thought to myself, how the fuck am I going to honor Gwen? Gwen shouldn't even be dead right now. Like, this is not right. This is not how life happens. This isn't in the context. She should be doing this for me 60 years from now. So that was really hard on all of us.
I know. I remember, like, we just all wanted to, like, do something. You know, I remember, like, all the girls getting together and just feeling like we're like, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do?
A lot of people felt helpless. And I mean, that's what it is, though. There's nothing you can do when someone you love that dies, and it's so special and out of context, because there's nothing you can do.
You can't like replace.
You can't. And that's, I think, the hardest thing is, like, I keep waking up thinking this is a dream. This is dreamlike. And I remember saying to my friend, like,
She's okay.
Is she okay? Yeah, we're good.
Wants to.
We'll just cut that out.
Russell's across the street.
But I remember saying, to my friend, like, after the service, I was like packing up her stuff in the closet, like the front closet, because obviously it was really hard to see things like that on the daily basis.
I remember you put everything away.
I put everything away not from her room, but in the front closet, like her mittens, her boots, her coat, and there was flowers everywhere still, and cards, like, by the dozen.
Well, and like the cake she baked. Her last day,
you know, it still sits in my freezer. And I was like, and she's like, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm okay. I'm good, I think. And I was like, I really haven't cried much. And this was a few days after everything. And then it hit me, I think maybe a week later. And I was like, this is bad. This isn't going to be easy. Day 2, day 3, I was going to the gym. Yeah. I
at that
was
point
in so much shock.
You had seen a counselor though at that point, or no?
The counselor, no. So she was she was with me since the very beginning. Melanie, she is wonderful. She saved my life, actually. So I think the next day she was calling me in between services. She's like, I know it's a really busy time for you, but I'm here. Let's chat. Let's set up a time to meet. So I actually really didn't talk to Melanie until probably 2 weeks in, after everything had happened.
Right.
But like she definitely saved my life, and she kind of made sense of what I'm doing here, right? Like, how are we going to navigate this? And I think the hardest thing is I didn't have control. She wasn't coming back, and I would now have to live my life without my daughter, which is horrible. And the thing is with our fucked up British mentality is, somebody dies and then you get up and you go on. You move with it. Yeah. But that's not the case. Grief grows around. Our life grows around grief, but grief never really stops, right? It's always going to be present.
I think it was harder for you too, because I know you're talking about like your routine. Like, as a parent, like, you have so much routine, but yeah, I mean, beyond like just like a regular daily routine, Gwen needed so much more from you. So it goes even like further, even deeper, as far as like appointments and follow-ups.
Yeah, we were at appointments
medications
once or
and
twice
things
a week. Yeah, medications 4 times a day.
She wasn't going to daycare. I know that you went back to work. You did so much with her, and like every second, and even like we'd go to dinner and like Gwen would come, you came over to my house. Gwen was always there. Like, she literally was a part of every single moment of your life. And I do look back at that, and I feel like grateful for that you really did like soak in every moment with her.
I think because I never thought I would have those moments.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like, you need to live life to the fullest, because it's true. Like, the only thing we're guaranteed in this life is to die. And that's why people are so, maybe again, British mentality, like, we're so scared to die and the death and what surrounds it. Well, I know. And like, but that's what I mean, right? Like, we're so against it, and in other cultures they celebrate that Day of the Dead and different things like that. But navigating my grief was really hard. There was some days that I would wake up and I would still act as if she was here. I would still talk as if she was here. And I think that's what really...
I remember for a long time after, you would not, and I never have mentioned this to you, but there was a while after that when you would talk about Gwen, and so I was that way as well, you would talk about Gwen still as if she was here. So you would say, instead of saying like Gwen was, you would say like Gwen is. And there was a really long time that it took, I think, to start hearing you speak in like past tense.
I think that's when I finally accepted, when I started dreaming that she wasn't here, right? Instead of she was here. And then when I started talking as past tense, and I remember talking to a friend at the time, and I was like, how did it really sit in you? And she said, well, it was when I started talking past tense.
Right.
You know, it was that switch in your mind, of that. And again, like just really accepting it. And I remember when I was navigating my grief, and again, we'll touch base on those appointments, and all of her medical team. I mean, we had 15 or so specialists between Kingston and Toronto, and when she died, I didn't even hear from them. Besides my medical family
I remember
doctor.
I was there when you called.
I got angry. Only because, and this is another thing I think that really needs to be touched light on, these people literally grew with us. You know, as the minute we got home, we were in clinic 2 days later, and then it proceeded, and they followed along on our journey. They were in our house, multiple times. They were family to us. I mean, I talked to them all the time.
Yeah, that's how you felt, right?
Yeah, and that's how I felt. Like, and they truly loved Gwendolyn as well. I mean, Gwendolyn was terrifying on paper, but to see her in person, like, this girl was thriving.
Yeah.
So when I didn't hear from some of those people, I'm like, but I just talked to you the day she died. Like, how do you not? And I remember reaching out, and I went to Sick Kids, to her specialist, and I said, hey, like, I don't know from your side of things, but like, I need closure. I need you to know that my daughter's dead, because I know you know.
Yeah, I remember when you made the call, and if I'm correct, didn't they respond to say like they had a policy?
So they have a policy at Sick Kids, or probably a lot of them, but upper management says, you know, allow the families to grieve before reaching out. And maybe that works for some, but others, I needed to hear from them that it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
They knew Gwendolyn on a different level than others, and people would come and say, it's not your fault, you did everything you could. Yes, that's fine. But they knew her from the inside out, quite literally. And I needed them to tell me that. And I needed them to be like, it's
and
not
Gwen
your fault.
needed that acknowledgement.
That
like,
acknowledgement.
You were protecting her.
Yeah. And you know, and her clinic nurse called me crying. And she's like, I'm so sorry. And I cried so much over the past few days, because I needed to know that they're human, and that they seen that I was human too. Yeah. We're no longer on a clinical basis here. We're dealing with a dead child.
Yeah, it's not a piece of paper.
No more.
This is someone's family.
And they're wonderful. Like, I'm part of this grief program there, and they send me newsletters and resources, and me emails on every Monday to check in, and I mean, they've been wonderful. And but at first I was very angry.
At the time, that was not what you expected.
Why isn't anybody noticing and recognizing that my daughter's dead? Like, I want to scream it from the rooftops. I want you to tell me why she's dead. Mm-hmm. So,
did the autopsy go to Sick Kids or
no? So Ottawa, the autopsy. So she was immediately sent to Ottawa, because they don't deal with like those kind of things this way, I guess. Mm-hmm. And Gwen was complicated, so it was immediate. You know, she was immediately sent to Ottawa. Autopsy was done, and then she was brought home for the service. But Sick Kids, I believe they did have some connection with the coroner. Again, very, very early on. So we connected, and that was the theory as to why we believe Gwendolyn passed away from this catastrophic thing. But there's still so much that I don't know. And that's a really painful thing as a mother, seeking for
answers
anything.
And closure.
Even if I'm no farther along than I was 10 months ago, at least I have a hard copy saying, you know, we checked everything off.
Mm-hmm. Because I know that maybe at like 4 months in, you had called them and followed up around 4 months.
Yes,
and yeah.
Well, even sooner, actually. Yes.
Well, yes, but I know at that 4 month part,
still haven't heard. Yeah,
we had expected, and you had expected to get something concrete by then? Because I think that was the timeline that they originally gave you.
No, about 6 to 9 months, they say.
Okay. And I know that some things had been completed at that time, but they don't share those things with you until everything's done. And so it's 10 months now and it's still not done.
So I know certain things, but again, it's such a tier when you deal with this kind of things, and the pathologists of, you know, certain biopsies, there's maybe one that can do so many in this province. So, and again, that's the unfairness of this bullshit system we live in, is why do parents have to wait and suffer quite literally every day and think of, you know, I find myself every day and my mind goes on a wandering of, well, why didn't I notice that? Or I look at pictures and I'm like, she looks a little off. Why didn't I notice that? And it's that constant, again, that control going back, although I can't do anything about it now. But I think having those concrete answers or checks off in the box, final in my hand, will give me a lot more closure to accept and continue on to my journey. I feel like I'm at a roadblock right now.
Yeah. I know as a friend, who you were as a parent and everything that you gave to Gwen. And I can just speak, you know, without needing to know what those results are, really, that this wasn't your fault.
I know. And I think I can finally say, you know, I know.
Yeah.
But again, it's that control thing.
You still deserve an answer. You still deserve an answer.
It's like, what happened? Right? It was like within minutes, seconds.
Yeah. And I think too, like, just really thinking back and knowing there were so many moments that we thought that we were going to lose Gwen, and we were preparing ourselves and then never did. And literally, like, was just about to get our G-tube out and just about to...
all these beautiful
appointments
things
were spreading out more, and you guys were getting to take a break. And then there was appointments that you had booked that your team was like, oh, she doesn't need those now. Like, everything's fine. We're going to cancel this.
And that's why it was such a huge thing for us of a loss, because nobody expected it. And I guess that brings me a little bit of closure too, because nobody's seen this coming.
Even professionals.
But again, like, I was angry for a long time. Like, there was days that I wouldn't recognize who I was. There was things I said and did that I regret.
There was a lot. I remember you saying so frequently that you felt that you didn't have an identity anymore.
No, I didn't know who I was. And it didn't really make sense to me until I started seeing the psychologist, another person who really saved my life, because I was getting into these bad moments where I would quite literally just sit there and blank out and replay her experience and hearing those words, she's not breathing, and they would haunt me to the point where I couldn't sleep. I would have night terrors. And I just remember being so angry, and he did this assessment on me. He said, would you believe me if I said you're disassociating from yourself? And I said, well, I know what that means. And he goes, do you remember driving here today? I said, no.
You just, like, got there.
He goes, what did you do this morning? Well, I have a routine, but what does that look like? When you look in the mirror, do you recognize yourself? I said, no. And that's the moment, even when my body failed me, I hadn't recognized myself.
Yeah.
I'm just learning who I am again. Like, I'm the same old Tamara, but there's many different aspects that I'm not anymore.
And it's because, though, you connected so much of yourself, because you were essentially, like, for those 3 years, like, living fully for Gwen.
Yes.
And you connected, I think, your whole identity with being a medical mother.
Oh, absolutely.
At the time.
There's so much to it.
And I think, too, and I just want to, like, just backtrack super fast just to touch on this, because when you talk about, like, being disassociated, I remember the funeral. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, I was just a wreck. Like, I could not even, like, breathe. I just felt like I was gonna, like, just...
Like a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm.
I was sobbing so loudly that I was like, I'm gonna interrupt this, because I was so distraught. And you gave a speech, and you gave, like, a beautiful speech, and you got through the speech, and it was incredible. But it's because you were so shut off from your emotions at the time. You were able to, like, to think that you were able to speak at your daughter's funeral, you know?
And my friend actually touched on that the other night. We were talking, and she's like, you know, you were so brave. You walked in there with so much poise, and you said this incredible speech, and you walked out. And she said, and then I was kind of worried. And then when they loaded up and you gave a rose to Gwendolyn and said your goodbyes before she went to go get cremated, she said, I heard a cry out of you that no mother should ever have to go through.
Because that was, like, your final.
That was my final. Like, Gwendolyn is everywhere, but her physicalness, her
her
physical
physical self.
body self was there, and
Yeah.
now it wasn't going to be.
Yeah.
But like I said, yeah, I was really angry for a long, long time, and I was masking. I remember I would be getting drunk every night. And I don't know if you know this, but quietly, like I would do my day. I would get up, go to the gym. I would do what I had to do. And then I would drink myself stupid.
I knew that you were drinking more. And I know that, and I'm not sure if like, this is like allowed to be said on YouTube, but like, I know there was a lot of times that we were really scared because you would say that you didn't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And I remember you said that a lot, and it was super scary as a friend because you were really serious.
There was Mother's Day. I remember Mother's Day, and I remember just laying in her crib.
You were supposed to go away that weekend.
I was supposed to go away. I was convinced, you know what? I was like, we're going to go away. We're going to go to an Airbnb that was rented, and it came, and I just couldn't physically get myself out of bed. And I laid in her crib for hours and just sobbed. And not what I would act ever on it, but there was a time I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I can't do this. And, you know, a couple days later, I showed up to my dad's driving drunk. And my dad lives only a few minutes away, but that's all it could have took for me to hurt myself or hurt somebody else. And I remember knocking on the door. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and he opened it up and he's like, Tamara, what are you doing? And I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be like this. And he just held me on the porch, and we sobbed. He's like, you're right. You have a whole life ahead of you, and you can't be handling it like this. And I think that's when it was really like, I need help. I need more than just grief counseling. I need more than just a few phone calls a week. I really need to get into where it all began. And that's when I seeked help through EMDR therapy.
Right.
Which is a very intense therapy.
And you had someone do this therapy previously, right? And that's how you found out about it?
No, so I've never done EMDR. I was booked to do it. But again, with our, if you don't pay private, it's very hard to get into this kind of therapy. Mm-hmm. And
probably very expensive.
Very expensive. But he brought me right back to the time I was 16. And when I had faced things that I've kind of put in the back burner, and it brought me right back to the night of, you know, when everything went south. And then it was when, with Gwendolyn's procedures and surgeries, and then the night that she died, and he just said, you know, what do you hope from all of this? And I said, I just never want to feel that kind of sadness again. And I remember our last session, and he said, you know, you've done remarkable. I don't think I'll ever be able to get all of this sadness away, because obviously it's a lifelong thing you will feel. He said, but I want to bring you back to the night you were in hospital with Gwendolyn. And I said, I want you to remove the tube out of her mouth. And I want you to rock her like you would every night in the chair. And I want you to sing to her, and I want you to kiss her, and I want you to put her to bed. This kind of therapy replaced those moments that I had with her with this beautiful thing that I used to do every night with her.
Right.
So it does work.
So that was essentially now your like last memory was actually putting her to bed.
A beautiful moment.
Is that how that was for you?
And it's very intense. I mean, it takes you right back to those scary moments, and then he brings you to a safe place.
Is it kind of like hypnosis?
So kind of what it does is it desensitizes you to the experience. So you're quite literally facing it head on. And it hits parts in your brain that maybe you've kind of put on on pause, because you're in this feeling
and I know
right
that,
now.
like for me, for example, like I feel like I blocked like all of high school.
Yeah.
And I literally, I do not remember high school at all. I maybe remember a couple of days. And I think sometimes too, like, you know all these moments, but there's probably a lot of moments hidden within these that you actually did just like block out
Yeah.
or
Yeah, and you do, because again, shock protects you. You don't want to feel those emotions, and I learned to like welcome them like bad house guests, and I really touch a lot on these emotions because every emotion is there to service a purpose, like anxiety, like fear, like anger, and I was like, I don't want to feel this. Like, I'm a happy person. I hate feeling this way. I don't want to wake up and feel this way. But because I kept feeling that, I was avoiding it. So I needed to allow it to come in, and I had to sit with it, and I had to welcome it, and then I would let it go. But I know it's going to be back, and I need again to, where am I feeling this? Why am I feeling this? Okay, this is why, because it's protecting me. You know?
You were always really like open with your emotions, I think, in a way. But I think like going through this now, you're super in touch with how you feel. And I think not just how you feel, like, even as a friend, do you know what I mean? Like, just like, I know there was a long time that you felt like you couldn't cry, and you just like couldn't cry.
And it would make me angry. I'm like, I just want to cry. Like, I'm a crier. I love that shit, but I just couldn't cry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think now, like, just going through these emotions and like going through, your counseling and going through, the therapy sessions and stuff, it's really put you in tune with your emotions and
self-awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness. I had to really become self-aware in order to really like understand who I was now and what I was doing. And I remember you would call me and you'd be like, how are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. And you're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, you're right.
You would always say,
I'm okay.
say,
I've got this. I'm fine.
I'm okay. Yeah.
And that's when I was like, okay, I need to allow myself compassion. This isn't something I'm just going to get over. But your society tells you get up and get on with it. And that's not how it happens at all. And like I said, those difficult emotions were hard, and admitting that I wasn't okay and I don't feel good and I don't know what tomorrow will bring was really hard as well, because I was always such a strong, independent person leading up to it.
Yeah. I think too that like we've talked a lot about like being open, and I think like even like your social media now, I know that it's definitely like a positive place. I still think, even though you've dealt with all these things, there's definitely still moments that it's really hard to be honest with yourself about how you're feeling if you're just having a bad day, but at least you're more like in touch. And one of the things that you've really talked about is like finding yourself, first of all. Like, do you feel like you've like found yourself?
Yes, I think now more than ever, I'm starting to have purpose again. And I think, that was like, I'm turning my pain into a purpose, and that is a tangible thing for me. But yeah, I think more than ever, I am recognizing again who I am. When I smile, I truly mean it. When I feel joy, there isn't so much guilt, because I've learned that two emotions can coexist, even if they're completely different. It's okay, because for a long time I would smile and laugh, and I'm like, why the fuck am I doing that? My daughter just died.
But you're punishing yourself
too. Quite literally.
You're punishing yourself.
And my grief counselor told me, why don't we look at it this way? If we're going to live and breathe, you do it for your daughter as well.
Yeah, because she was just like, she would want that for you. Of
Absolutely.
course she would.
I mean, everyone says that, right? So it's like, oh, she would want you to live and, and breathe. And it's kind of like the same people, like, what do they say to you when they find out your child died? Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, why would you be sorry? It's not your fault. But it's such an awkward thing. And, and I've gained a lot of relationships and friendships, and I've lost some too, because they couldn't handle me at my worst. Yeah, they were okay at my best, but they couldn't handle me at my worst. And I wasn't nice at times because I was angry.
Yeah. I think there was also people too, like, coming into your life that maybe things didn't like leave well, or your relationship kind of fell apart, and when Gwen passed away, all these people were all of a sudden like popping up in your life again. And kind of looking back now, it's like, what was the intent here? Was the intent because you felt guilty? Do you know what I mean? Because
you weren't present. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, everyone is here for a season, reason, and a lifetime.
Yeah.
And losing friendships or losing relationships or any of like that thing, that's another grief that you have, right? But I've learned now, like, I can't justify it.
But you're also learned now too, you're only in control of yourself.
I'm only me. That's their energy. I'm good with that. right? So again, yeah, like, and when you navigate grief, it's like the same thing. Like, you feel like a burden on other people, and maybe you are a burden on some. Well, those people don't deserve that. They don't deserve you for that.
You're so right. If
cheers to that.
You're so right, because, well, I wish there was alcohol in here.
I know. I was like, can we just get a shot of vodka?
Why don't get us wine? Why do we not have wine in here?
It's getting heavy.
Yeah, but you know what? I think too, we just had this conversation in another context, that it's like your friends are your friends, and everything that you're going through, it could be the same thing every single day, and it does not change. We're going to want to listen to you. We're going to want to be there for you. It's never going to bother us. We're never going to feel...
But you feel like that. I felt like that for a long time. I didn't want to show my true self, because I'm like, she's just the girl that her baby died, and now she's that person forever.
You were so
that wasn't
worried
good for me.
That people thought that. I know that one of the things that you struggle with, like, even outside of the situation, is you struggle with, like, perception.
Absolutely.
You struggle with people's perception, and you always worry, like, it doesn't consume you, but you definitely worry, like, what are these people saying about me? Like, what do people think of me? And I remember there was a really, really long period that you were so scared about how the world was going to perceive you, thinking that it would be, like, in a negative way. You know, and I think that was really tough too, because I'm like, Tamara, like, everyone just wants to support you through this. And I said this in the first episode, that it was like, this touched people that maybe you didn't even know, or they didn't know. And I know that you've also built all these, like, connections with people outside of
beautiful friendships,
our community now. Like, you were just talking about a girl this morning that has lost a child, and now you have this bond together.
Absolutely.
And then not even local, there's people that that are sharing, like, sunflowers in
UK.
Like, all around, you know. And I just think that is insane.
And I think because that's the part of disassociation and PTSD, is that you prepare yourself for the worst because you expect the worst. And I think that's what happened when Dad got really sick as well. I was like, well, he's not going to be okay, so I'm just going to mentally prepare myself. But that's so draining, because you're preparing yourself for something that likely won't happen. And I think that's why I'm like, oh, well, people are going to think the worst of this. They're going to think it's my fault. Like, I couldn't save her. I failed her. I failed me. I failed everyone. So it was just easier to think that way, because I was preparing myself. I was protecting myself again.
But you're also in, like, a negative mindset.
I was in a negative mindset.
You're in a negative mindset. And it's hard to, like, it's really hard to get out of that way of thinking when you've just conditioned yourself to protect yourself.
That's all you know.
And then it kind of just, like, translated into everything, like, every area of your life.
Fight or flight. Fight or flight, survival mode. Absolutely.
And it's just having, you know, also being aware of, like, now your triggers too.
Yes.
What are, like, some of your triggers now?
Triggers. So, I mean, obviously, like, if I see an ambulance,
going into the hospital, because your dad was just
my dad
in the hospital for a while.
That was really hard. Different appointments in a hospital. I quite literally say for my next baby, I'm doing home birth, because I don't want to ever be in a fucking room like that again. And which is terrifying to think, but triggers. So hospitals, monitors, codes.
I know children too, right? Because there was, like, in the beginning. I mean, I remember the first time too that you came over to, like, be with the boys.
I cried. I bawled. I held Owen and I bawled.
So worried. I was so stressed about that, and I was also scared too, because, like, you know, I at that point had a child that was
around the same age as Gwen.
Same age as Gwen, like a couple months apart. And that was terrifying for me, and I felt like I needed to, like, protect you almost from the kids, and I didn't want to talk with the kids. I was worried to talk with the kids, and you know, even, like, leaving your house to be like, oh, I've got to get home to the kids. I just felt like I felt guilty because I was so scared that, like, that was going to be painful for you. And I know it took a while, and you know, but you're just, like, it's who you are. And this is why, like, I know, and I always knew that you were eventually going to be okay, because we talked about this before, that it's always little things for you, but your heart is so, you're so loving. You have, like, the biggest heart, and you could never, you know, turn them away. You love them. You love kids. You love, you know, you love the boys because they're mine, but you also just, you love children. You love that interaction. Your heart's so big. And I think that, like, I was worried that that was going to be really hard, but I actually felt like it was a little bit healing for you, because you needed that embrace. You love that connection, and that's so important to you.
And that's so hard. Like, I have moms come to me now and they're like, well, I lost, my baby this long ago. Like, how do you surround yourself around parents that are your friends or children? And I just always say there's no timeline to grief. Like, we're all grieving differently. And at first I was nervous to be around like the boys or my godson, who I love so much, and different situations that we were once involved in with Gwen. But then I was like, why would I stop loving because of this?
Yeah.
I have so much love to give. And that's what I tell parents, you have so much love to still give. And there is still so much life after loss. And there really is. And that's what I'm learning, is that there is life after loss.
Just because you're loving doesn't mean that you're still not loving Gwen.
Absolutely.
Or like still living for Gwen and having all the love that you had for Gwen.
For sure.
And I know that like in the future you'll want to have another child, and like that's important to you. And I think that you'll need that, because you do have so much love to give, and I think that's super important. And even like our friend Maddie, like she's pregnant now. She's having a little girl, and that
was a trigger for me. And Maddie, I've talked about this, and I remember her telling me, and it was a beautiful thing, but I remember having to walk away, and I cried. Not because
I remember it was with me.
It was a thing. It was definitely a thing, and that, you're right, that was a trigger for me. Now because
we didn't expect that. We didn't know that was coming. Yeah.
And I think she was a little nervous to tell me too.
Of course. Yeah.
And that's what I mean. And I think that's why you do develop deeper friendships, or you do develop deeper relationships, or you lose certain things because people just can't relate to the grief aspect where you are now. But, it took me time to process that.
Yeah.
And now I can't wait.
You're so excited.
I'm so excited, and I'm so excited to have that girl again in our lives. But it was
you like had gifted
trigger.
Maddie.
I had gifted
some
Maddie
things of Gwen's, and I know, and we're like so excited. And but that doesn't mean too, even in that,
I mourned that
we're going to forget about Gwen, or that Gwen's not still like a part of.
I guess I want Gwen to be there with her.
Of course.
She is, but not on her side, right? And that's something that, again, our whole life, when I have kids in the future, it's going to be, I'm always going to mourn that aspect of Gwendolyn not being present.
Yeah, of course.
And I think anybody will. Yeah. Their loved ones, right?
But I love to hear now too that you're at a place that you can go on in the world. Because I know there was a point that I
didn't think I could.
You were like, I could never see a child. I could never see someone that, is pregnant. I could never, like, you couldn't even leave the house. So I think that, like,
brought me anger.
Yeah.
I was like, why her? Why not me?
Yeah.
That was a big trigger. You're right. Not anymore, I guess. And it was hard for me to even go grocery shopping. I think I would put my earbuds in, and I would hide away, and I was like, oh fuck, there's somebody in so-and-so and their child, like, God damn it, like we were just at playgroup last week and together, and so that was a big again, why me, and anger, and I hated feeling that way. I hated feeling bitter. I didn't want to feel like that.
No, you're not.
But I had to recognize it in order to heal it.
Yeah. And you really have, like, we just forgot that shower, and like, everyone, like, we're always, like, as friends, like, always wanting to protect each other, not just protect you. And that doesn't mean like sheltering people from things, but we're such like a close knit of friends, and like we've been through so much together.
A lot.
And so we kind of, a lot. But so we kind of know each other well enough to like anticipate, you know, and like it was great. Like we had a beautiful time.
I think where those coping skills come in, like and this is why I tell, like, counseling may not be for everyone, but it is such a powerful thing to learn those tools and utilize them, because I desensitized myself. I imagined going in there. I knew there was going to be children there. I knew there was going to be a lot of little girl things, and you tell yourself this, and you get ready for yourself. Again, you can still do that and still feel shitty after, but in that moment, I learned that tool that I utilize very much so today.
Yeah. I remember too, like, I remember you saying, like, I'm sad for myself, but I'm so happy for her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
And that's so true. And so, I think too, like, just it's been 10 months for me, it still feels like,
yeah, some days it's just like it's been yesterday.
Yeah, it's still, and I've said this to you from the beginning. I
Yes.
know that I still have some things to work through with it. I think that you do know that I feel very in denial. I've said from the beginning that
it just doesn't feel real.
I don't think that I will ever accept that. I don't think that I will ever be able to accept. I know you're so accountable for healing, and you've always been so accountable. I don't want to.
I had to be.
I don't want to.
I know,
so
but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. But you deserve it. We deserve it as people. Like, they don't, it's just so easy to brush off, but you know what? It comes up. And that's like when I was in the early days, I was living my life and doing what I needed to do and being productive, but then I would get stupid drunk at nighttime.
Yeah.
And go to sleep.
Which you have, you're in a good place and you've been able to have
now, but I had to take responsibility. I had to take accountability, and sun will rise.
I don't want to take responsibility.
You need to fall
I just
forward,
want to
not back,
ignore
Caitlin. We're getting really
everything.
quotes.
So honestly,
getting deep here.
Seriously, but that's something that I've said from the beginning.
Yeah.
For me right now, that even if I felt like I was,
you owe that to yourself.
Coping it, I still don't think that I will ever really fully accept it. And so it's been 10 months. It feels like it was, yesterday.
Very deep
sometimes.
Yeah.
I know you're still waiting on this full report right now from the coroner.
Yeah.
And I think that, now you're at a point right now, you've started your social media and you've built this following, even before Gwen passed, that has been connecting moms, like you said.
Yep.
Need to get the dog in here. She wants to join.
She just wants to join us.
Girl time. Sorry, come here.
Yes.
Of course, right at the end, right? Of course, right at the end.
Don't ruin it, Suri.
Yeah. If anyone wants a dog. Just kidding.
Take it out.
Just kidding. But I think too, you've developed this page, you've developed your social media, which I think social media is an incredible thing.
It really is. Yeah.
I love social media, and it's an incredible
community.
It's an incredible platform to be able to share and connect with new people and and get a reach out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so now your social media, it's kind of flipped and it's kind of switched in terms of
where the direction's going, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't even going to keep that blog. I wasn't even going to keep the blog. I wasn't even going to keep the platform of it all. It's I might as well not do it anymore. I'm going to get rid of it. But then I was like, you know what? No, this opens up a whole new area of gates and doors for me and us, and living out her legacy by helping people. And I can't believe how big it's getting.
Yeah, it really has grown a lot. And I think, it is exactly what you said. It's turning this grief into purpose. It's something tangible, and
helping others.
Yeah, and you, you're already you have a creative mind. You have you have really turned into meditation and
grounding.
Yeah.
It's taught me a lot. Death has taught me a lot about grounding and manifesting and self-awareness and wellness. And it's just a whole different level for sure. But yeah, I think next episode we'll talk about, again, coming to terms and learning where my purpose was, and the first time I kind of caught a glimpse of turning that pain into purpose. So
yeah, for sure. God, well, I can't wait.
Cheers.